In the city of Keego Harbor, one of the most important issues over the past several months and really couple of years has been the future of Roosevelt Elementary School, the original building, 103 years old, on Cass Lake Road, just a little ways away from City Hall, and the bustling Orchard Lake Road in the heart of the lakes is scheduled for demolition later on this year, and a group of residents coming together in order to try to save the building. And part of the reason that this building could potentially be permanently shuttered still as the plan is and be demolished is because continuing on with this building in place could potentially open up a future where new ownership comes in if the school district were to sell the building, and potentially a charter school that could compete with our local school districts. And that all goes back to a state statute that may be at fault here. And Representative Noah Arbit talked in Lansing about this issue, testifying in the House Education Committee on Tuesday earlier on this week. And he joins us now on the Splash Live to discuss this discussion that you had in Lansing. Representative Arbit, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Tyler. I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to have you on to talk about this really important issue in the city of Keego Harbor. Let's begin with the basics behind House Bill 5025 and how that relates to this issue of grand importance to residents in Keego Harbor.
Yeah, well, as Keego Harbor State Representative, I've been really attuned to this issue because it's something that a lot of my constituents in Keego talk to me about in terms of, saving the Roosevelt School building, which is such a gem, a historic gem in the heart of the city of Keego. And so when we've been discussing with the school district, what could be done and, what the issues were sort of behind, this decision on demolition, one thing kept coming up time and time again, which was Public Act 98 of 2017, which is called the Educational Instruction Access Act. It was something that was passed by the Republicans in 2017 and signed into law by former Governor Snyder. And basically what it does is it ties school districts' hands as well as local government's hands and basically prohibits them from placing a deed restriction on a school property if that deed restriction is intended solely to prevent a sale to a charter or private or parochial school. And this is something that has concerned a lot of public schools. And the unintended consequences of this law, which was basically enacted really to as a boost to the charter school industry. But this was really a negative consequence, was that school districts across the state, instead of selling these buildings, which could be redeveloped and used for housing, for senior centers, for veteran centers, or a number of ways to meet the needs of the community today, they have just demolished these buildings. They've adopted widespread a policy called demo, don't sell. And that's because school districts, need to protect themselves. And so if the sponsors of the original bill really thought that school districts wouldn't react to the state trying to tie their hands and basically, in many ways force them to try to sell to a competitor, then they were wrong. And so, as Keego Harbor State Representative, once again, I looked at this and said, well, if this is something that could get the school district to change its mind and get to a more comfortable position with selling the building and redeveloping it to a redeveloper who will redevelop it into housing or a community center or something. We do have a housing crisis in this state. Then I'm going to introduce this bill and I'm going to push it forward. And so yesterday we had our first hearing on House Bill 5025, which fully repeals the Educational Instruction Access Act. And the thing that's really important to remember is that this isn't just an issue in Keego Harbor. It's an issue that we've seen, from Benton Harbor to Lansing to Detroit to Oak Park to Waterford and Walled Lake. All across the state, this has been an issue. And so if Keego Harbor is the canary in the coal mine, I'm happy to be doing my part, not only to represent my constituents in Keego, but to really make this important policy change for the entire state.
And it's important, too, because unfortunately in this scenario, given the circumstances, there are kind of two different sides to this issue when it comes to Roosevelt. On the one side, it's the Keego Harbor residents who have a strong emotional connection and a familial connection to Roosevelt School. It's obviously an important part, being really the centerpiece of that city from a buildings and landmarks standpoint. But then on the other side, you have the West Bloomfield School District, who has to think about the entirety of these four communities and beyond that they serve and also maintain some sort of a competitive edge, because competition can be helpful and it's necessary. We have several school districts that our local residents can choose from right here in Greater West Bloomfield. And so this gives options to the community. Not only were you able to speak about this issue in committee earlier on this week, you also had a chance to do so while being in the presence of residents from Keego Harbor as well as representatives from the West Bloomfield School District.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to say, like, competition. No one's afraid of competition. I'll put the West District up against any competitors, and we know that close to 40% of the West Bloomfield School District, pupils are school of choice, and so they're choosing to come to West Bloomfield School District. But yeah, I invited Treasurer Carol Finkelstein as well as Kirsten Sonneville Douglas from the community to testify in support of my legislation, to really give the local community perspective for why this bill is really important. And we had a really positive hearing yesterday in committee. I think the committee members are very positively disposed to reporting the bill favorably to the House floor. And I very much hope that we will be able to pass the bill through the House, and then we'll do this again in the state Senate, hopefully, and then get it to the governor's desk. And I think making some progress on this, hopefully, will give residents of Keego Harbor the ability to go to the school board and say, look what your state representative has done. Look what we've been able to pass into law. If you wait a year, you'll be able to have the ability to put a deed restriction on the property and remove that as a consideration. Really, my impetus for introducing this legislation was based on listening not only to the concerns of the residents in Keego Harbor, but also to the leadership of the school district, and saying, well, this is a really big barrier to keeping the school standing and selling it and redeveloping it. Well, okay, as state representative, I'm here to, provide some solutions. And so I want to remove that as a consideration. And, in the process of this, it's really started as a local matter, in my district. We've discovered just the really negative, pernicious policy implications that this bill has had for communities all across the state. And I don't want to see any community have to endure what, my constituents in Keego Harbor have had to endure.
And it's like you said, Noah, it's an issue that not only faces our local school district here in West Bloomfield and, of course, the city of Keego Harbor and what has been an historical centerpiece of that community for over a century. It affects other communities across the entirety of the state. Before we let you go, anything else that we should know about the process and where we're at with this potential change to the statute?
Well, after yesterday's committee hearing was really the first important step of the legislative process, and after the committee votes on the legislation, then we'll have to schedule it for a floor vote, and hopefully we'll get enough votes to pass it through the House and then on to the Senate and then to the governor. But unfortunately, I don't anticipate this being a bipartisan issue. It should be a bipartisan issue. Everyone, Republicans, Democrats, should have every interest in preserving historic buildings, and that's really what this legislation is that it has resulted in the original law has resulted in the widespread demolition of these historic gems in communities. And I think we should all have an interest in seeing this law repealed. But if to the extent that there are people in our community or people outside of our community who are watching, make sure you're contacting your state representative. If it's not me, obviously I'm already in support of my own legislation, but your state representative, your state senator, making sure that they're in support of this legislation, I think is really, really, really important.
Like any other issue, so many layers to this. Noah, thank you for helping us unpack this issue a bit today.
Thanks, Tyler. I appreciate it.